It started with a notice taped to my front door, bold red letters screaming eviction notice. HOA President Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, had been gunning for me since the day I moved in. Apparently, my lawn was exactly 1.3 inches too high, my mailbox was too futuristic, and my house didn't match the approved aesthetic of the neighborhood. That last one was her favorite complaint. My home, a sleek, metal-clad structure with smooth curves and mirrored windows, stuck out among the cookie-cutter suburban houses like a spaceship among horse-drawn carriages. And that's because it was a spaceship. But Karen didn't know that. Not yet. I crumpled up the notice and sighed. All right, Karen, you want to play games? Let's play. I had moved into this neighborhood for one reason. It was quiet. Tucked away in a cul-de-sac with large yards and no major city interference, it was the perfect hiding spot while I worked on my project. See, unlike my lovely HO-obsessed neighbors, I wasn't interested in patio furniture and seasonal wreaths. I was interested in interstellar travel. My house, to everyone else, looked like a bizarre modernist structure. But in reality, it was a fully functional spacecraft disguised as a suburban home. For the last 3 years, I had meticulously integrated my technology into the design. Reinforced hull plating hidden beneath vinyl siding, gravity stabilizers masquerading as an underground sprinkler system, and an engine core buried deep beneath the foundation. But Karen? She just thought I was a nuisance who refused to paint my house beige. The eviction notice was just another move in her long campaign against me. First, she tried to fine me into submission, $54, unauthorized mailbox design, $100 for excessively reflective windows, and $200 for failure to comply with HOA-approved holiday decorations. Then, she started sending letters to the city, complaining about mysterious humming noises at night. And now, eviction, because I failed to meet neighborhood standards. I had two options: fight this in court, where Karen likely had all her HOA lawyer buddies lined up against me, or take a more direct approach. I glanced at the control panel hidden inside what appeared to be a standard kitchen cabinet. The lights flickered as the ship hummed to life beneath my feet. Yeah, I knew exactly how I was going to handle this. As if on cue, Karen appeared outside, clipboard in hand, surveying my property like an emperor inspecting their kingdom. She tapped her foot against my driveway, her expression full of self-importance. I stepped outside with a grin. Morning, Karen. Beautiful day, isn't it? She sniffed, flipping through her notes. I see you've received your eviction notice. You have exactly 7 days to vacate. She smirked. Of course, if you decide to sell the property at a reasonable price, we could expedite the process. Oh, she wanted my house? She had no idea what she was messing with. I clapped my hands together. Karen, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I think you'll find that I will be leaving on my own terms. She narrowed her eyes. That's not how this works, Mr. Johnson. The HOA has rules, and you are not above them. I chuckled. We'll see about that. I gave her a wink and walked back inside, locking the door behind me. 7 days? Huh? That was more than enough time to make some modifications. By the time I was done, Karen wouldn't just be evicting me, she'd be watching me launch straight into orbit. The first step in my plan? Test the thrusters. I wasn't about to leave without making sure everything was operational. My ship disguised as a house hadn't been off the ground in years. Sure, I ran diagnostics, but nothing beats a real test. The challenge? Doing it without Karen or the rest of the nosy neighborhood figuring it out. I headed down to my basement, or, as I like to call it, mission control. A holographic display flared to life as I flipped switches and tapped commands. The ship's reactor hummed in response, ready to stretch its wings. I activated a small test burst just enough to lift the house a few inches. Outside, a deep rumble echoed through the cul-de-sac. Karen, watering her regulation-approved hydrangeas, snapped her head toward my house. What in the? She squinted, but before she could investigate further, I killed the thrusters. The ship settled back down, the tremor fading. Karen frowned, looking around for the source of the noise. Earthquake? No, she muttered before storming off. I smirked. That's right, Karen. Nothing to see here. Phase 1? Success. Next up, the decoy plan. If Karen thought I was just a stubborn homeowner, she'd keep trying to evict me. But if she thought my house was haunted, she'd run for the hills. Time to get creative. I activated the external projection system, a harmless but effective holographic trick. That night, as Karen peeked through her blinds, she'd see shadowy figures moving inside my house, ones that weren't me. Let's see how Karen handles a close encounter of the HOA kind. By the second day, Karen was suspicious. She hadn't caught sight of any ghostly figures, but I could tell she was watching me through her windows, through binoculars, maybe even through a telescope. I wasn't sure, but she was lurking, just waiting for another strange occurrence. So, I had to up the ante. I'd done my research. Ghosts weren't just the creepy, moaning type, they were also nocturnal. And they loved to mess with lights. So, I hooked up a set of infrared projectors inside my house. When Karen peeked through her blinds that night, she'd see not only shadowy figures, but also glowing red eyes darting across the walls. It would be like a paranormal horror movie in her very own cul-de-sac. But I wasn't just playing to scare her, I was playing for time. While Karen was distracted by my increasingly bizarre house, I was preparing for the real test, a full-scale launch. I spent the next few days working on the final preparations. With Karen's watchful eye always on me, I had to work quickly and quietly. I brought out the big guns: manual override switches, emergency landing protocols, and a complete atmospheric shield that would protect my house from any interference from her pathetic HOA ordinances. There would be no way for her to stop me now. It was the night before the launch when I decided to add one more touch to the ghostly charade. I programmed the ship's internal sound system to play suspenseful whispers sounded like distant conversations from another world. I couldn't resist. When Karen heard that through her walls, she would lose it. Sure enough, around midnight, I saw her silhouette pacing back and forth in her living room. I watched her, no longer the aggressive, rule-enforcing Karen I'd come to loathe, but a scared, paranoid woman, her hands shaking as she clutched her blinds. The whispers echoed again, louder this time. She pressed her palms to her ears, muttering to herself. I swear, if I'd had popcorn, I'd have been eating it right there. Then, out of nowhere, I saw it. She was on the phone, and judging by the frantic look on her face, she was calling in backup. I grinned, realizing it was game on. I wasn't just playing pranks anymore. It was time to launch my house into space. And Karen? She was about to get a front row seat to the most unusual eviction in HOA history. The night had arrived. Everything was in place. My house, no, my spaceship was primed for launch. I had one final check of the systems: thrusters, reactor, landing gear, yep, all systems go. But of course, Karen was still up to her usual antics, peering through her blinds with wide eyes, waiting for the next paranormal event. I'd even seen her talking to a couple of the neighbors earlier in the day, whispering about the strange happenings at my house. Little did they know, the strange happenings were just the beginning. Karen had no idea what was coming. I glanced out the window and saw her standing outside, talking to Officer Reynolds. That was the last thing I needed. It was bad enough that the HOA had made life difficult for me, but now it seemed like Karen was escalating things by bringing in the police. Great. Now she was convinced that I was a mad-in with a haunted house. At this point, she probably thought I was some kind of criminal mastermind. I smiled to myself. No one ever expects the quiet, unassuming guy to be building a spaceship in his living room. My hand hovered over the launch button. I had rehearsed this in my head 1,000 times. Everything had to go smoothly. One wrong move, and I'd end up with a crater where my backyard used to be. But if it worked, well, Karen's reign of terror was about to come to an end. I took a deep breath, hit the button, and suddenly, the entire house shuddered beneath me. The thrusters roared to life, and the ship slowly began to rise off the ground. The lights inside flickered, the holographic projections kicked in, and the eerie whispers returned to their full, chilling volume. Outside, Karen and Officer Reynolds froze, staring up in shock. The house was lifting. I couldn't help but let out a triumphant laugh as I watched them. I had finally done it. What the hell? Karen screamed, her voice barely audible over the roar of the engines. The house continued to rise, slowly but surely. The surrounding homes, now nothing more than tiny specks below, were quickly losing their relevance. Karen's carefully pruned lawn, her approved flower beds, everything was shrinking into the distance. I was free. I noticed Officer Reynolds standing frozen, his mouth agape, while Karen had begun to run in circles. I could see her hands waving in the air, but it was too late. By the time she figured out what was happening, I was already too far gone. No more fines, no more complaints. She could kiss my perfectly aerodynamic house goodbye. But as I made my final adjustments, something caught my eye, something unexpected. I saw a small, white van speeding toward my house. A couple of HOA members, no doubt. They had no idea what they were about to witness. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching me fly off into the stars. No, they would have to deal with something even better. I activated the ship's external floodlights, blinding the approaching van with an intense beam of light. It was like a scene from a sci-fi movie. The van slammed on its brakes, and the poor HOA members, now utterly confused, stared at the blinding lights as I sailed higher and higher. I tilted the ship slightly, and with a final push of the thrusters, I blasted off into the night sky. The neighborhood below looked like a tiny diorama now, but Karen? She was still standing there, watching in disbelief. I gave her one last wave before the ship shot upward, breaking through the atmosphere. As I drifted into space, I smiled. My life had just taken an unexpected turn, and Karen's had just turned upside down. No one would ever mess with me again. I was soaring through the stars now, leaving Earth behind, my house-turned spaceship cruising peacefully through the void. The stars shimmered outside, and for a brief moment, everything was perfect. No more HOA complaints. No more Karen. Just freedom. But there was something oddly comforting about looking back at the planet. My life was a complete 180 now, and yet, I had a feeling Karen wasn't done with me. If I knew her, she'd find some way to make a scene out of this. I activated the communication system to broadcast a message. No, it wasn't a distress signal. It was a message for Karen and anyone else who might have been caught up in her paranoia. I couldn't resist the urge to leave one final mark before I disappeared into the great beyond. Attention, all HOA members. I, Mr. Johnson, am hereby permanently leaving your so-called neighborhood. Enjoy the view from down there, Karen. I'll be sending postcards from the moon. I let out a laugh, feeling completely untouchable. Karen could try to find me, but I had no plans of returning. Who could blame me? She was probably still standing there, trying to process what just happened. And then, my communicator buzzed. I blinked, unsure if it was a glitch or if someone actually managed to get a message through. I picked up the transmission, curious. The voice on the other end was familiar. Mr. Johnson, you think I don't know what you're up to? You're in space now, but I've already contacted the authorities. When you return, you'll face charges for everything you've done. It was Karen. I rolled my eyes. Seriously? This woman never gave up. But then, a different voice cut in, calm and measured. Actually, Karen, it's not going to be like that, the voice said. I'm Agent Thompson with the FBI. I'm currently investigating your illegal activities back on Earth. You've been embezzling funds from the HOA and using your position to harass residents. The people you've been terrorizing? Well, they have a few things to say about you. There was a pause before Karen sputtered. What? This is outrageous. What are you talking about? Just sit tight, Agent Thompson said. You'll be hearing from us soon. As for Mr. Johnson, I think he's earned a little more than a free pass. I froze. What was happening? Mr. Johnson, the agent continued, his voice now warmer. We've had an eye on Karen for some time. She's been using her HOA powers to line her pockets. It seems you've been a bit more involved in this than you realized. We have a few questions for you when you land. I sat back in my chair, staring at the stars. I thought I was done with Karen and the HOA. But apparently, there was more to this than I'd expected. As the ship continued to drift further into space, a grin spread across my face. Not only had I finally escaped Karen's grip, but it seemed I had stumbled into something much bigger. And now, it looked like I was part of the solution. Karen? Well, she had just met her match. The neighborhood tyrant's reign was over. And as for me, I was headed for the stars with the best view of it all. Like and subscribe for more videos like this.